I think we should be live. Good morning, everybody. We're just waiting for the last couple to join. Hopefully you can all see the screen. Steve, Craig, you can see the screen? Good. Well, it's a minute past, so let's get started. So hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the latest in IPI's series of webinars. Today we're going to be looking at the bedrock of any contact centre really, which is its workforce engagement and how things are obviously changing rapidly in contact centres across the world as we face the sort of COVID-19 pandemic that we're all facing. So let's just introduce ourselves. My name's Ben Smith. I'm a consultant here at IPI and I'll be the host for today's session. Alongside me are two of our workforce enablement consultants. Between them, they've got over 40 years of combined experience in the space. So if I could hand over to you chaps to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I know we don't look that old, do we, Steve? I'm Craig Farley. I head up our WFM consultancy practice at IPI.
And I'm Steve Ronker-Vabuda, and I work with Craig to deliver workforce enablement consulting to our many customers in the IPI universe. Our hope today is that we can share some of our recent experiences, thoughts, challenges with you all, and hopefully get some ideas going about how we might best cope during this unprecedented period that we're all facing.
Yeah, great. So just to set the scene, really, the format for the session. For those of you who haven't been to one of our webinars before, firstly, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. It's sort of always useful to just to give a quick overview of how we like to run these sessions and how they sort of operate the best, really. So please do post questions at any time. There should be sort of like a little chat window sort of floating on your GoToWebinar console. Submit any questions through that. We'll cover all those at the end. We do have a few polls sort of scattered through this. Please do provide us with the input there. Not only is it useful for the sort of session as we sort of run through the session today, but the feedback that we get is really useful and sort of interesting for us and just helps us keep our finger on the pulse really for what's happening outside of our existing customer base. As I mentioned, Q&As, we're going to cover all those at the end, but also we want to make this a bit of an open forum as well. So, you know, we'll probably mention it a few times as we go through. Submit any sort of ideas or tricks that you may have sort of used, and we'll sort of cover those off as well at the end of the session. There will be some contact details put on the screen at the end of the webinar, and we'll also, I think this is arranged that it will link will be sent around to everybody for the recording. If there's anybody that missed it perhaps, or any of your colleagues that may be interested in the content, that should be coming around to you as well. So the first poll, I'm just going to try and launch this here. We thought we'd just sort of start with a quick question to sort of find out how people are doing really in response to the sort of current sort of pandemic. Hopefully you should be able to see that on the screen now. Craig, Steve, is that up?
Yep, thanks. We can see the first question there. So we're asking, what is the biggest issue that your contact centre has seen in response to the COVID-19 outbreak? And there are a few options there for you. So please have a look, have a vote, and we'll give you a few moments just to register your votes. And hopefully we can then have a chat about the responses that we're seeing. But Craig, I think it's fair to say that I think every contact centre that IPI works with has actually seen some form of change as a result of this pandemic. Would you say that's fair?
I would say, yeah, it's pretty much impossible not to have something changed at the moment, isn't it? Seeing a lot of extremes with call volume, certainly.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily that calls have increased, it's sometimes they've decreased. Do we have the results, Ben?
We do, yeah. It's quite fun actually watching the percentage of people that have voted. It's sort of going up and up. But if we pause that there, because we've obviously got to get through the slides, and then the results should be on the screen now. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. That's an interesting spread of results, and to be honest, it's pretty much what we expected. The challenges are pretty much all there for us all to see, but the biggest ones I think certainly are around difficulty in managing our staff, which a lot of us are seeing as a common problem, and we're also seeing that our F&S are not our forecasting and scheduling isn't necessarily catching up with the position that we're all in. So I think we will be talking about some ways in which we can cope around that challenge as we move through today's webinar. So I think the key thing, looking at all of those votes and the way that they're spread, is that actually things are quite confused right now. So I guess what we're saying to you is, the very first message is, if you're feeling confused, if you're feeling like, oh my God, when's it going to change next, because everything seems to be changing on a daily basis, is you are not alone. I think everyone is absolutely in the same position. The picture's changing almost on a daily basis. I think we're all glued to our TV sets around 5 o'clock in the afternoon when whoever it is leading the government today tends to pop up and makes the latest statement. Is Boris is Boris still ill? Is he not ill anymore? Is he back leading the country, or is Dominic Raab there, or is someone else there? Has someone else made an announcement? You know, life is changing. We are having to adapt and change very quickly with it. Lots of upheaval, lots of change to our working practices. We're all based at home. We're not based in the office, most of us. And absolutely, and to cap it all, you know, our call volumes are also changing. So for some of us, they've risen dramatically, and for others, they've fallen off a cliff. We've got no calls at all, really. The constant, though, guys, and the great news is we all have the technology to cope with this. So our workforce enablement systems, our workforce management systems are here to help us with this, and they're kind of flexible enough to hopefully guide us through. So what we need to do is think about the way we're using them and make some changes to that to hopefully guide us and give us that clarity that we need when the rest of the situation is in a bit of a chaos mode. So we're looking for clarification and a resolution to the confusion. So Ben's going to talk to us now about the 5 questions we're going to summarize in today's session.
Yeah, so just for today's session, we've limited it to sort of 5 topics. Very quickly, what they are, just pop these up on the screen now. Number 1, how do you forecast accurately and sort of manage the rapid change that you are inevitably seeing? How are you able to track who is available and what agents are actually doing? Are you actually making sure that they're doing what they've been planned to do? So we're going to be covering that. That's 3rd. You've also got the changing needs of your agents. Now, this is quite a big topic. We're going to cover that as well. But also, there's that reassurance play as well. This is this is a people connection. We'll be covering that off at the end. So, if there's anything on the screen, if there's anything you'd like to learn about that isn't on the screen, perhaps maybe submit that, and we can talk about that. We have set aside some time at the end just to sort of cover off anything that comes in. But this is the sort of the 5 topics we'll be covering. And to kick us off, to hand over to you, Craig.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Yeah, I think that is a good point there. One of the positives to come out of all of this is that everyone's kind of pulling together more. So we're seeing a lot more collaboration, and by all means, put those ideas or things that you've seen that have worked well, or challenges you're having in the chat window, and we'll try and get a chance to talk to some of those at the end. So the first kind of step on our WFM cycle is to create a forecast. So we're going to talk about some of the challenges that you might be experiencing now when it comes to forecasting. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about here is going to be around shrinkage. So normally we would put in a provision for shrinkage as a percentage of pay time that we're expected to lose from our employees, and at the moment that's going to be quite unpredictable. We've got staff self-isolating, maybe changing their ability to work. We've got more sickness, less notice of absence, and certainly a lot of change there. Same with call volumes. So our call volumes at the moment, we would normally have months, years of nice data that we've put together to create forecasts with, whereas at the moment that's kind of changing day to day or even during the day. So changes in government policy, restrictions, changes in travel, changes in finance, and the kind of things that we're able to claim or use for support there, they're all driving different impacts into our contact centres. So influencers as well, so people like Martin Lewis, the money saving expert, and as Steve mentioned earlier, the government announcements in the evening. We're less now about looking at long-term data and statistics and kind of managing our short-term human behavior or what we think is going to happen. So it's less about the science and more about the art of forecasting at the moment. And channel usage, so we're seeing a lot of difference in channel usage. Customers, particularly if they're struggling to get through, are hopping across different channels, and even on the same channel. So you may have your nicely separated call routing plan with your different phone numbers for customers to call or different options for people to select in the IVRs, but at the moment people are just trying to get through the quickest way that they can. So it doesn't even necessarily mean that a call that's come through on a sales line is going to be a sales call. So these are all challenges in how we understand what's going on and how we forecast for them. And any existing forecasts that we did have that were based on our pre-pandemic metrics or on volumes before this period, they're probably going to be inaccurate. So we're not really going to be able to use much of that that we put together. But don't panic, because Steve has got some ideas for us, haven't you, Steve?
Yeah, so I guess what we're saying is don't panic, and remember those fantastic processes that you use for your forecast day to day, actually they don't change, but what does is the way that you use them. So the data you put into the game does change, but the way you play the game doesn't. So what we're going to do now is talk about some ideas that we can potentially think about to possibly change our forecasts or create even temporary pandemic forecasts, which might help us to actually more accurately predict our call volumes in what's a very changeable time. So the first thing to consider is lots of us, I mean, certainly those of us who had any forecasting time on our sheet, and I've certainly got some forecasting time on mine, I know Craig has. Those of us who've spent any time forecasting know that we spend a lot of time selecting great huge data ranges and working out from that what we're likely to see in terms of call volumes. We might go back months, we might go back even years. So some of our customers I know use 2-3 years worth of data and when they're looking at their forecast. So why not think about a shorter time period? It's absolutely possible that your call period that you need to extract data from within the pandemic will be, say, even a week or perhaps 2 weeks. So the data might make more sense if you just use a much shorter time period. So consider that first off. When you're thinking about your volumes, also look at your absence levels. Unfortunately, sadly, we know that lots of agents are having to take time off of work, either because they're having to self-isolate because they're showing COVID symptoms themselves, or because members of their family are showing symptoms, and that places a lot of extra pressure on the house. It's possible that agents will have to take time off, maybe at very short notice. So check your absences for previous weeks and try and model based on that. Obviously, we also see on a daily basis the national statistics for the numbers of people that are getting sick, so it gives you a rough idea perhaps as planners to think about how we're actually using those metrics in our own contact centres. So model with that and think, well, what's the position likely to be based on what we've seen for the last few days? And this is where we go back to saying forecasting is more of an art form and less about the numbers and more about what you think might happen. It's much more difficult, of course, in these confusing days to come up with a more accurate picture. But of course, the more you visit it, the more you revisit it, the more accurate it will become. So think about your absence levels. Check your traffic. So we've said already, customers will try every which way but loose to get through to your contact center. It's quite possible that if your call volumes have increased dramatically, that they're just going to go through your IVR and hit any option which they can just to try and get through to a human being. It's quite possible that customers will come through on sales lines when they've actually got major escalations. So think about your volumes across all of your channels. And if they can't get through on the phone, it's highly possible that they're going to take to other methods. So they might email. So check the amount of time that your agents are spending on email, maybe dedicate more agent time to email or to other methods. So even social media, you might find that your tweets or Facebook posts are increasing dramatically. So think about other channels and try and balance that out. So if you are experiencing problems in phone, it's highly possible that you'll have to think about using other channels of communication and forecasting against those as well. And finally, as I've just said, think about the points at which you're reviewing your forecast. So whereas before, in the good old stable days before COVID, We used to review our forecast perhaps once a month or once every 2 months. Now we might have to do it daily or maybe even weekly. For example, I was working with a customer just last week who are now looking at their forecast on a daily basis and actually changing based on the same day from the previous week. And that might be a good tactic in terms of thinking about how your volumes are actually moving forwards. So maybe if your volumes are dramatically different on a Tuesday to a Wednesday, you can now start to forecast on an individual daily basis to cope with that during the pandemic crisis. So there are some ideas from us on how we think you might want to possibly change your forecasts or possibly modify your forecasts. But if you have any thoughts of your own, please share them, pop them into the Q&A, use the hashtag tip, and then we'll be able to pick those out later on in the call and we'll be able to go through the best tips with you. So having thought about forecasts, there's obviously going to be an impact from that on our schedules and how they might move on. So Ben, you've got a poll for us, I think, on how we're going to be looking at scheduling.
I do indeed. Yeah, hopefully that's on the screen now.
Yeah. Fantastic, thank you. So the next question we're asking is, has your business made any significant changes to scheduling or management of agent schedules in recent weeks in response to the COVID crisis? So please vote now. And whilst the vote's going through, Craig, have we seen any evidence of our customers making changes to schedules?
Yeah, lots. I think it's difficult not to make changes at the moment, isn't it, really, with everything that's going on?
I think absolutely true.
It's interesting to see what stage people are at. Is it just that react and just keep the lights on? Or is it now we're starting to sort of adjust to this new way of working and sort of getting those changes made? You know, have they already been made or starting to do that? So we've got some responses in. It should be on the screen.
Thanks, Ben. So yeah, we're seeing that for just over half of you have already made changes to your schedules, and that's great news. So you're responding to the challenges in place. We're going to make some suggestions in a moment on how we might make some more changes to your schedules to further optimize things. But again, if you have any ideas, feel free to share them. Craig, I think you're going to talk to us now about the challenges around scheduling, and then we'll come up with some more ideas on how we might make some adjustments.
Yeah, that's right. And also for those that are unsure, by all means, put in your questions or your challenges you're facing into the chat. So how do you know who is available to work and what they should be doing? So when we're in our lovely contact centres, it's quite easy to just look out at your team and see who's in and know that one person goes to break at 10 and then the next at 10:15. But when everyone's working remotely, things can be a bit more difficult to know who's going to be available that day, especially if you don't have a WFM system. It's arguably even harder, and you need to find some way to capture that centrally. So some of the scheduling challenges that we're coming across, we need to consider the impact of people self-isolating and being unable to work as normal. So they're perhaps changing their routine. Perhaps people have childcare interruptions. So all the kids are off school at the moment. My kids are off school, and I'm kind of half nervous that at any second now they might burst in through the door and I'll be like that guy in the BBC News interview. But yeah, people are going to need to juggle that and look after their children. Home life challenges and stress. So as if all of this wasn't kind of stressful enough, people are having challenges at home around employment. So if there's multiple people that live in the household, maybe people's jobs have changed and they're having to juggle that. Maybe they've got new jobs, different jobs, second jobs. So these are all challenges that people are trying to cope with. And then just getting people working in the first place. So having an appropriate workstation to be able to work remotely. And Ben, you kind of started talking about this during the poll. So something that we've definitely seen is there's kind of a few stages that customers and contact centers have been going through. And the first one is, let's just get everyone up and running with the ability to work from home. So a laptop and a headset maybe. And then the second stage now is really, how do we start managing the situation as if it was kind of BAU. And that's why we wanted to put together this webinar around managing your forecasting and scheduling aspects. And then the third stage is very much kind of what extra can we do with unique or interesting processes or technology that lend themselves to flexible working, not necessarily just during this time, but the kind of best practices of flexible working and working in volatile times. It's very much a period of hyper volatility at the moment, so everything's kind of amped up around that. So Steve, what kind of things can we be doing around making changes to our schedules?
So thanks, Craig. There are some interesting thoughts there around the challenges which we're facing at the moment. And again, just to reiterate, I think we're all in the same boat in terms of these challenges. But again, we can say that our WFM systems, our workforce experience, can still be managed in the same way as we did before, just changing the way that we do it. So we can still use our schedules, but we can update them and look at changes in agent circumstances. And one of the things we're going to examine a bit more later is the way in which we can potentially use agents' own preferences to try and influence schedules. So looking at agents and their overall capability to work, and they may wish to work different hours or different shift structures. So we can consider our agents' preferences when we're updating our schedules. We could also think that, remember, our staff are not traveling, so it might be that they're able to work earlier or later in the day. So consider earlier start times or later finish times maybe. Think about the potential for much wider shift patterns. Could agents' shifts be split? So potentially an agent might want to work for 2 or 3 hours in the morning and then, I don't know, stop off and do some homeschooling with their kids, maybe do a Joe Wicks online PE session, or some other commitment within the house, and then come back and work a little bit later on. So think about splitting shifts out. Maybe 2 or even 3 splits in a day would work well for your agents. And also consider part-time working and think about demand for evening shifts. So it might be that if your customers can't get through to you during the day, they might try and call back later in the evening. And if that's the case, you may want to offer more evening work. So consider offering all of that. Once you've made all of those changes and you've updated your shift patterns, it may well be that your agents will see some changes in their schedules. And if that's the case, that's when their mobile apps are really going to become useful. So make sure that updated schedules go out to customers on mobile apps if you have that capability, so that they know and they feel engaged in terms of their commitment and their capability. And if they then want to make swaps or make adjustments to their preferred schedules, they can do that with you. So mobile apps are your friend in this. And for those of us who are seeing call volumes falling away, and there are a few, consider that time for training or upskilling. So think about possible options for training or upskilling your staff. You may want to use them to make outbound calls to customers that are particularly prone or at risk during this time. And don't forget that for some customers, the only contact they might get with somebody outside of their house might be you calling them. So maybe a call to them might be very useful. So think about those options. So there's some suggestions for you around how to adjust your schedules. Now, we're going to have another poll now looking at the ways in which our adherence tracking works and look at some options around adherence. So Ben, I think you've got a question coming up on that.
Yeah, which should hopefully be on the screen now. Have a look. So, are you able to use adherence and tracking effectively whilst your agents are working remotely or with different shift structures? Well, the first poll, I think the main challenge was actually, working remotely, managing those agents working remotely. So this is a sort of quite a good follow-on from that, really.
Yeah, I guess there's 2 bits to it. There's the kind of technical bit. Are you on your normal phone system and normal WFM system? And then there's the kind of management aspect, the business aspect of how you actually use your adherence.
Yeah, it's quite fun to watch the results coming in, because it is neck and neck between 2 of the answers. We just had a jump. I think we'll give that a couple more seconds. But we do. Oh no, it's just it's just great sport to watch this. So hopefully there should be some results on the screen now. Chat. Can you see those? They were, yeah, I think we've got winners there.
I don't think anyone could ever say that the result of that poll is a surprise, to be honest, Ben. Thank you for that. So 56% of you have said you've tried to use adherence, but it's difficult, and we get that. So I think what we're going to do now is Craig is going to talk us through some of the challenges which we're seeing with the use of adherence, and we're perhaps going to have a little rethink on the way in which we approach it. So Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So so we need to make sure that agents are doing what's planned for them. That's kind of the whole point of adherence. But we need to approach it maybe a bit more delicately than normal. We're going to have technical challenges that might even prevent us from using adherence. So what I've kind of tried to talk about here, what I'm going to talk about here, is not just strict adherence in terms of measuring and reporting it, but also a bit around the behavior and the performance management and how it might impact agents. So not maybe strictly what you would call adherence, but certainly what's going to be affecting their performance and their ability to meet customer demands. So what we don't want to use now or even when we were in so-called normal times is adherence to beat agents with. So it's not, okay, well, you scored 89% yesterday instead of 90%. Why was that? I think really it needs to be a grown-up conversation and understand underlying reasons of why adherence isn't being met. It's absolutely important, and we need to let agents know that adherence is important because they need to be there for our customers. But if you're going to use it badly, and you're not going to kind of be maybe a bit flexible, or at least a bit empathetic to what's going on at the moment, then it might leave some of your agents at risk of kind of burnout. So if you're just driving them to go back into available take calls, if they've got calls in the queue for an hour maybe, and that's, I've heard a few customers have that, then they're going to be at risk of burnout. So what you're going to start to see is maybe AHT creeps up, particularly your wrap time. Employees aren't going to want to go back into available to take another call. You're going to start to see that your employees are not engaged, particularly if you're struggling to get schedule information out to them and you're struggling to communicate with them. I think there's maybe a bit of a tendency to cut things like meetings and huddles when you're really busy, but actually I think that's maybe a false benefit. I think you think you're getting the time back, but you lose out really in terms of performance and engagement. So we still need to keep that communication high to ensure that our agents are motivated, because otherwise, in terms of adherence, they are going to be taking more unscheduled breaks. They are going to be coming back later from breaks, and they're not going to be there for your customers when you need them. And also, working from home, they're naturally going to have interruptions as maybe their two children try to kill each other and start shouting and screaming. These kind of things are going to happen, or the cat jumps on your lap. So there might be times when people go into unavailable briefly. And again, it's more about understanding the reasons why and being a bit more patient. So Steve, what kind of other things can we do around adherence and performance?
Thanks, Greg. So I think what we're talking about here is there are two approaches really. It's understanding agent circumstances and also using our technology to see where we can help and support our agents more. So the first thing we would encourage you, if you've got the capability to do this, is to encourage your agents to check their own adherence. Now, a lot of our products include scorecards, and it's absolutely possible to include or create a scorecard very quickly which includes an adherence check. So your agent could either use a scorecard, or they could just have a look at their own live adherence data for previous days in their tracking and look at the overall positioning that they're seeing. So if they're seeing that they're performing really well at one particular point of the day, then they can perhaps share tips on how they've done well with their other colleagues. It will also help them to see where time is possibly being lost. Now, unfortunately, it's a fact of life, as Craig's just said, that home life or other distractions are going to have an impact. So if you are seeing situations or points in the day where you're losing time, perhaps you can get support from your colleagues on understanding where that's happening, or raise it with your manager if you're seeing that as an issue. If you are a manager and you're identifying that, perhaps you can offer support to those who are finding things difficult. So it's not necessarily a stick to beat someone over the head with, it's a carrot. It's understanding that actually if there is a drop-off in metric, then there might be really good reasons for that, and we can help to get through that piece. Perhaps offer extra training if you have time available to do that, and we appreciate not all contact centres have the time to offer extra training, but sometimes that's an option you can consider. And finally, this one is not so much a WFM recommendation, but it is certainly something that we've found useful, and that is to offer regular calls and video chats with your teams. And one of the things which we know is a big factor for an agent working in a contact centre is that they get to chat with the colleagues sat around them. So it might be the guy sat opposite you, or the person sat next to you, or that conversation that you've had in the kitchen with a colleague. None of that, of course, is possible when we're all working remotely. So it's important to bear in mind that that time needs to be factored in, and the technology is here to help us do that. So it might be that you'll use the chat functions within your own workforce management system if you have that capability. It might be that you choose to use external chat systems. So don't be afraid to use WhatsApps and Snapchats. These are encrypted chat conversation methods which you can use just to catch up with each other. And it's important just to maintain and keep yourself feeling motivated when actually you can feel quite siloed. The key things for us here is we're looking at supported agents, because if an agent is supported well, they'll perform better. So consider all these options, and we'll go into them a little bit more in a moment, but consider supporting your agents, because the more they're supported, the better they'll perform. And ultimately, for us at least, and certainly based on what we've seen from the customers we've spoken to in recent weeks, SLAs and metrics matter. Of course they matter, but they may not matter as much as normal. And that's really, I think that's a really important message. Use them as positive methods to motivate agents where you're performing really well. But if things have gone a bit wrong, don't be afraid to just be supportive.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I think.
Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's a good point there. There's no point in trying to still achieve a 1% abandon rate, for instance, if you're getting calls in the queue for an hour, or you're getting 5 times as many calls as you would normally do. So it's being a bit more realistic and kind of setting those expectations perhaps a little bit lower at the moment. So in terms of what we can do for our agents and accommodating some of their changing needs, especially as they're working from home, working flexibly, working remotely, we need to be flexible. So agents, customers, employees, we're kind of all in this together at the moment, and we need to be a bit more flexible and understanding with each other. You know, everyone needs to do their best, and everyone is doing their best, but we just need to have a bit more patience, I think, at the moment. We want to offer schedule preferences to our employees, but we need to understand and store this centrally, ideally in a WFM system or a spreadsheet or something like that, what your employees are available to work, because this could be changing quite a lot. So make sure that you have, as a planner, an up-to-date record of who can work what and when, and that you're building that into your schedules. And to kind of help augment that, try and promote shift swaps if you can, or request for working alternative hours. So I quite like the ideas that Steve was putting through earlier around splitting shifts or micro shifts or moving shifts to different times. Be proactive, go out there and ask people. You know, these are strange times, and people are much more able to accommodate different ways of working at the moment. So yeah, regularly recalculate your SLAs as well. So like I was saying, don't be afraid to try different scenarios, because this is not BAU for a lot of people. It's something quite different. And review your forecasts regularly, because they may well have changed, and advice or information in the public domain may require you to change them accordingly, and then update your schedules. And then Steve, I think, have you got a few more for us?
Yeah, so I wanted to focus a little bit more on perhaps some non-tech approaches which we might consider as well. So what I wanted to do really here was to break this down into thoughts for agents, thoughts for your customers, and thoughts for managers. So for our agents, I think what we really want to say overall is that regular reassurance for all those three categories is vital, especially if you're working remotely. We want to avoid feeling remote. So for our agents, we want to know that they're continuing to do a great job in challenging times, and that they are being motivated in the correct way. So as we've said, not to use adherence negatively, to constantly keep communications positive, to use regular communications, to make your agents feel very supported, and to make sure that they know that they're doing a great job, to keep them part of an online community. So set up those chats, use WhatsApp chat groups or other mechanisms to keep your agents together, and make sure that they're not feeling siloed or part of a remote situation. So that's for agents. For our customers, it's about making them feel reassured that our services are not going to stop. A lot of us are providing really critical services right now, be it finance, be it car purchasing, be it insurance. They want to know that they're still able to contact you regardless of the situation that you're in as a business. So for your customers, make sure that you maintain service as much as you can, but also give them that reassurance that services are not going to stop whilst you're in this situation. But saying that, you might want to also think about some other common sense ideas. So maybe update your announcements, so your IVR announcements. So when a customer calls in, they might want to be just included a short message to advise that that the agents are working from home, which might mean a slightly slower response time, maybe, so that your customers are not feeling quite so remote when they do finally get to an agent. And for managers, it's about maintaining service, of course, and trying to do that in the face of these really challenging situations that we're facing right now. But it's also about identifying during this process and during this situation the working practices which work really well. So some of this remote working that we're doing actually might be really great for when we're finally all out of this COVID situation and we're back to fairly normal working practices. So it might be that agents will have identified that actually they really like working from home and they feel supported enough working from home, so they can do that after we've gone. So don't be afraid to think about using some of these options after we've finished this whole process and we've gone back to our normal operations, once we've all been allowed out the house again and we can all go to the pub and we can all go back to work. So those are some ideas perhaps away from the systems.
So this is quite a major part. This is the people connection, isn't it? And this actually brings us on to the last poll that we're going to run, which hopefully is on the screen now. But this is just, just to sort of gauge really those in the audience, perhaps, how have you sort of made any changes to the way that you are working with or communicating to your agents during the pandemic? Because, as we sort of touched on, we're all in this together. But what are you doing? Because this is a major part of this current crazy situation that we find ourselves in. So yeah, here we go. We've got answers coming in. Not so much of a close. Oh no, just as I say that, things squeeze up. Results should be on the screen now.
Yeah, it's great to see, I think, then that everyone's making some kind of adjustment. So it's all right for seeing occasional catch-ups or daily videos and lots of emails. I think that's a really good message, actually. The transition is such that, you do need to make more of an effort to reach out to people when they're working remotely, and the results suggest that. One of the ideas, as I said, that we've come up with as IPI is that we're actually now on a Friday running a virtual catch-up session, which we're calling a virtual pub. So lots of us choose to go to a pub maybe after work on a Friday. So all we're doing now is we're taking that and we're moving it into a conference call. So we're now able just to catch up with our colleagues, have a quick beer maybe, or a drink of your choice, and just talk about the week, because life is a bit crazy right now. Everyone wants to just maybe devent a little and just work out what's going on. So it's just a nice way to catch up with things. So think about creative ways to use your conferencing and to bring people together.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that, we can talk about our experience here at IPI on the virtual pub, that we run. It's actually become a bit of a platform or a forum where we've actually learned a lot more about our colleagues and maybe their interests outside of work that perhaps we wouldn't have spoken about. One of our chaps is an ex-DJ, so we've had him playing. So it's just having some fun with it, really, and sort of making the most of the situation that we are in. So just to recap then, what we've covered, I think have I still got the results on the screen there, Steve? I think I have, haven't I?
Yeah.
That's slick. So just to recap, a recap and a quick reminder of some of the ideas that we sort of covered on the session today. So point one, revisiting forecast data regularly. Don't be afraid to make changes and actually follow intuition as well. You may have a gut feel that certain channels or volumes are going to respond in a certain way to a certain external force. Don't be afraid to sort of make those changes and implement them within the organisation. Knowing what everybody's, knowing who's available and what they're doing, stay in contact with people, encourage people to update their preferences, introducing these new, daily team touch points to sort of replace those sort of micro conversations that people would normally have in a contact centre or just a general working environment, really. Sort of create the opportunity for those to happen and just to sort of, people to continue as best possible. Checking adherence, encouraging agents to sort of check it themselves and getting them to think about how they can make changes so it's not seen as a sort of stick to beat up the agents with, because we've got to accommodate the changing needs of agents. Can we do that with alternate shift patterns, for example, different working day arrangements, considering home life activities of agents as well? And on that point, it may be that for some of agents, there's a bit of an outlet, a nice change of scenery. They might all of a sudden have two kids running around banging saucepans together that they're not used to having. So actually, don't be afraid to ask what the preferences are of the team and try and accommodate those as well. Reassurance to your agents and your customers that services are going to continue, obviously as far as possible, keeping those communications constant, but yeah, that sort of reassurance piece as well, and sort of being appreciative that everybody is aware that we are all in this together as well. So if I move on to the last slide, which should be our questions, if you bear with us 2 seconds, chaps, I'll just move on to the questions. So first question, are you seeing customers being uncomfortable with agents accessing data from home?
I mean, we've got a security arm at IPI. Within that first week or so, or in the lead up to the lockdown, the amount of extra physical two-factor authentication tokens that they had to order was ridiculous. So absolutely, it's not ideal sometimes for certain businesses, but needs must, and kind of the work has to keep happening. So you've got to just make sure that your IT policies are as stringent as possible. You've got that two-factor authentication, VPNs where possible, and I think people's business continuity planning and their ability to quickly shift people securely remotely has really been tested in these times. I mean, the security bit's not so much my expertise, but certainly if whoever asked that question wanted to email through, we could certainly get someone from one of our security teams to follow up.
Mm-hmm. I think also from a customer perspective, there might be a bit of a lack of confidence, and certainly for some of our customers, there has been a suggestion that agents have actually had direct challenges. How are you able to see my data from home? So it's important just to reassure customers that data is held securely in your systems and that IT policies are there to protect data, and that obviously there are rules and there are laws which protect customer data in those systems. So it's important to remind your customers, if they're in that situation, that if they're not feeling comfortable, that there are regulations there that do protect them. So again, if you want any further clarification on those restrictions, and I can see who's asked the question there, so if you'd like to come back to us with any further thoughts on that one, perhaps pop us an email. The email address there's there on the screen. It's wem@ipintegration.com. Myself and Craig are both on the end of that email address, so we'll be able to take any further points or observations from that question. I think we've got another couple of questions there, Ben.
Yeah, so next one, should our agents tell our customers that they are working from home in case there is disruption from background noise? You think about that, Steve?
So I think absolutely yes. I think we've talked about that to a degree in today's webinar. Getting disruptions from kids, cats, dogs, telephones, other people working remotely, challenges, exercise videos, all these other things. These are all part of what we're seeing in a regular day-to-day occurrence. So yeah, absolutely. And as we said, you may want to also include an announcement in your IVR for your business that actually says our agents are home working and therefore may be subject to some kind of interruption. Think about maybe just give your customers as much information as you can during this uncertain time.
I think I think most customers kind of realize that everyone's working from home, and there may be standards, if that's the right word, they're expecting a bit less in terms of that absolute crystal clear audio quality with no interruptions or sounds in the background. So there's maybe a bit of that, but I think where the agent does bring it up with the customer, especially if it actually happens at the time, I think that's normally fine, and it's dealt with quite nicely. It's quite a nice little talking topic on the call from ones I've heard.
Yeah, I've moved from the room that I was going to do this session because we were expecting a delivery, and I just knew that the postman was going to put us off. So no, I didn't go that far. But no, I agree. I think yeah, people should be advised that they're working from home. You can add a reassurance bit of scripting in there that all our systems are secure and we're logging on, of course. But it's at the end of the day, it's a human talking to another human. So yeah, I think there's no harm there at all. Is there something we can use that may reduce call waiting times? Obviously, we have spoken about that a bit. Craig, you mentioned that some organisations are seeing wait times over an hour, some have fallen off a cliff. So, is there something we can use to reduce call waiting times?
Yeah, I mean, so if your call volumes are quite volatile, some of the things you can do are look at the kind of callback systems. So systems where the call will be queued for you, and then you'll automatically get a call back when your call reaches number one in the queue. So it at least saves you queuing personally for that length of time, which can be quite annoying depending on the music that you play to customers whilst they're on hold. Hopefully you're not also telling them at the same time that their call is important to you, because that is probably just rubbing it in at the moment. It's like I said before, we're in hyper volatile times and people need to be a bit more flexible. Some of the other kind of things that you can do are within your IVR, look at things like ID&V, so identifying that customer so that it at least is chopping off some of the AHT. So whilst the customer's on the call, they're not going to need to spend that time verifying themselves because they've already done it, and therefore it's making a bit of use of that dead time whilst they're queuing, but also it's saving your agents having to spend that time. It gives you more time to actually speak to the customers.
Nice, yeah, definitely the queuing and callback solutions can be something to smooth that demand. Next question, how much variation in shrinkage has been seen by other companies during the pandemic?
So I'll pick that one up. We've seen quite a lot, as you'd expect, we've seen quite a wide variation in the answer to this. So for example, I'm working with a major car finance company who've seen their shrinkage increase by up to 40%. Whereas others have seen very little movement. So it really does depend on the business that you're in. But of course, if you are seeing substantial changes in the shrinkage, you can build that into your forecast. And as we said earlier, don't be afraid to revisit your forecast as often as you need to keep it updated. So as situations change, your shrinkage will change. So bring that into your forecast.
Craig, anything you'd like to add to the shrinkage, or we move on? Next one.
Yeah, I think that captures it. Hopefully you're able to still find time to put those daily meetings in though. So I think that's an important use of shrinkage. I think you should still be putting those in even if you're really busy.
Nice. We've moved to a temporary phone system, and whilst working at home, we're not seeing adherence feeds anymore in our workforce management. Why is this?
Okay, that's an interesting one. It sounds like your adherence feed data isn't getting from your disaster recovery phone system into your workforce management. Maybe whoever's raised that question with us would like to just ping me a few more details to that email address, and I'll pick that conversation up with you directly. It does depend on your phone system and also the way in which you're using your adherence data. So there are a few more bits and pieces of information we'll need to answer that question fully. So please just ping us some more information to wm@ipintegration.com. and we will help you with that question. As we said, adherence isn't a stick, it's a carrot in these times, but the more information you have, the more empowered you are to make change. So get in touch and we'll give you some more support on that particular question.
Yeah, I think it's probably just something that in the rush to get up and running on a different phone system, I imagine they moved to maybe a cloud phone system or something like that, which normally is fine. You're normally able to send that data to your WFM system, but if it's not your usual phone system, then maybe in the rush that integration piece hasn't happened.
Similar question to one we had. Could we, as a company, issue a recorded message before the operator or agent picks up to advise that our agents are working from home, so to excuse any background noise they hear?
Yeah, I think that reiterates the point we made about updating your IVR, or even just apologising to the customer when the agent, when you finally speak to them as an agent, just to say, I'm sorry it's taken a bit longer, we're working from home. Sorry if there's any interruption during the call. Just make them feel at ease before you start, I would suggest.
This one here, it's a bit of an open question. How can I route calls better? Now that doesn't go into much detail, but that could be that it's a DR telephony system you've moved to. Yeah, that's a difficult one to really come back on, I think. Unless anything burning off the top of your heads, chaps?
No, I mean it kind of it is related, I think, to what we were saying earlier around any calls could be coming in on any line at the moment. It's that kind of all bets are off mentality. So maybe if you're finding that customers aren't paying attention to your IVR options, or calls are coming in on unexpected numbers, that actually if the people you've got answering those calls aren't skilled to answer those calls anyway, maybe you actually want to look at grouping lines together and at least get a bit of benefit around efficiency and be able to answer those calls, even if you wouldn't traditionally do it like that from a training point of view or a skills point of view. You might at least be able to get some efficiency gains out of having a bigger pool of agents answering the calls rather than a few different smaller pools maybe.
Yeah, I agree. I think simplification is the key, especially with agents working from home. It might be they'll get a much wider range of inquiries in any case. So if you're able to predict more accurately on a smaller number of queues, maybe that's going to make your life as a forecaster a bit easier too, maybe.
So yeah, everybody calls sales if they want to get through, isn't it? Because they bolster the sales team. So how do I look at different scenarios and see the impacts? Oh, sorry. So let me start again. How do I look at different scenarios and see what the impact of those would be on my forecast and scheduling process?
Okay, so don't be afraid to try out different scenarios. And some of the systems which IPI offer do include scenario management or what if management. So don't be afraid to use that. So go and try different situations. What's the impact if I increase shrinkage by 20%? What's the impact if I decrease my likely call volumes by 40%? You know, where am I likely to see fall off in agent requirements or increase in agent requirements? Use those systems. Don't be afraid to rerun scheduled processes. And don't forget that you can use different models, include those agent preferences as well. So yeah, there are lots of ways you can attack this, and just don't be afraid to experiment is the message.
And I would also add to that, actually, not just the forecasts, but also what your goals are. So if you have a very high service level goal, and you know you've got no way of achieving that, I'd maybe bring that down a bit to something more realistic. And you might find that the algorithms in your WFM system actually give you a better, smoother fit with your schedules. You might see some improvement that way, rather than, well, if you're expected to achieve 0% service level throughout the day, it kind of doesn't matter what you do then. You're, at least if you're a bit more realistic, when you make changes, you will see an impact when you do, rather than, well, you've moved from a 0% service level predicted to a 0% service level predicted.
Another one. How we're really busy. How do we find time to have daily calls with the team?
Oh, that's the magic question, isn't it?
Can you magic up some time, Craig?
I can't. There's no magic answer to that, but I do think you've got to do it. I think even if it's just 3 to 5 minutes with your team, and if you've got different shift patterns, you might have to do it a couple of times throughout the day, or even if you look at getting them to come on, a couple of minutes before 9 o'clock, if that's their scheduled shift time. I think you've got to have that, just even if it's very quick call, and you've got to make time for it somehow. And in the grand scheme of things, if you're that busy, it's not going to have a huge impact, but it is going to improve your performance and things like your agent motivation, their engagement, and you'll see things like AHT and number of calls answered improve.
Totally, and avoiding agents feeling siloed. Very, very important that agents don't feel remote, don't feel on their own during this whole situation.
They need to know what the key messages are at the moment and what's expected of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Chat, I'm conscious of time. I think this was originally meant to be a 45-minute session, and I think we've already overrun. Such is the interest in the topic. Obviously, it's unprecedented times that we're in, but I think it is probably a good idea to start wrapping this up. Just really thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us for the session today. Fully appreciate there's a lot of sort of crazy times that we are currently facing, a lot of challenges that people are facing as well. Hopefully what we've covered has been useful. Hopefully everybody's taken something away, no matter what level you work at in the organisation and where you quite sort of fit in. Hopefully there's been something in there that you sort of able to glean some benefit from as well. The email address was on the wm@ipintegration.com. Feel free to get in touch. The link to this will be sent around. I think we mentioned at the start. This will be sent around automatically as well. Anything to add? Let's go to you first, Steve.
No, just to say thank you very much to our audience for joining us. You've all stayed online for the whole of the hour, which is fantastic. So it's great that we're able to support you. Please remember to get in touch with us if there's anything further you'd like to ask us after the session. We know that sometimes those questions that you're thinking of perhaps don't come up during the session, or you might be too shy to ask. That's fine. Ping a question to us. It's wem@ipintegration.com, and Craig or I will be happy to either give you a call or respond to that email as soon as it comes through. And thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe and stay sane. until then. Thanks, guys. Thank you.